There comes a point in every woman's life where the mirror doesn't just reflect your face, it reflects your story. I remember standing in front of that mirror on a quiet Sunday morning, dye box in hand, my bathroom sink stained with the usual splashes of dark brown. It was supposed to be routine. But that day, something shifted. I looked at my roots, the silver strands that had fought their way through yet another layer of color, and instead of seeing defeat or age, I saw defiance, truth, a kind of quiet courage I hadn't acknowledged before. You see, for over 2 decades, I'd been caught in a cycle, every 4 to 6 weeks like clockwork. I was in the salon, or hunched over my bathroom sink, trying to erase any sign of gray. I wasn't alone. So many of us have been trained, conditioned even, to believe that gray hair is something to hide, that silver is a signal of fading relevance, that white strands somehow make us invisible in a world that values youth above wisdom. But here's what no one tells you when you start coloring your hair. It's not just about appearance. It's about identity. It's about fear. Fear of being seen as old, as past your prime, as someone whose best years are behind her. That fear runs deep. It's in the ads we watch, the movies we love, the subtle compliments we receive when we look young. It's in the hush that falls over the room when a woman proudly says she's letting her gray grow out. For me, the turning point wasn't a dramatic revelation. It was subtle, like the first hint of autumn in the air. It came from small things, a comment from my granddaughter. "Grandma, why do you hide your silver hair? I think it's cool." A moment of connection with a stranger at the grocery store. An older woman with a shock of silver hair pulled into a proud bun. The way she walked, head high, eyes forward, stayed with me for days. Then came Cicero. No, not in person, of course, but I'd been reading more in recent years, especially about aging gracefully. And Cicero's work, De Senectute, or On Old Age, spoke to something in me that no beauty commercial ever had. He didn't see aging as a burden, but as a natural, even honorable phase of life. According to Cicero, growing old is not about loss. It's about gaining perspective, influence, and freedom. He wrote that old age takes away what is inessential and leaves behind what is most human, our thoughts, our wisdom, our soul. I sat with that idea for weeks. It was in that context that I finally decided to stop, to put down the dye and let my hair become what it wanted to become. Silver, white, honest, me. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. I was terrified of what my friends would say, of how my children would react, of whether my husband would still see me as attractive. Terrified of the stares in the coffee shop, of the photos where I wouldn't recognize myself. But I did it anyway. Not because I was brave, but because I was tired. Tired of hiding, tired of feeling like I had to pretend. The first month was the hardest. That little white line creeping down from my scalp felt like a spotlight. I wanted to reach for the bottle again, to erase the evidence. But something stopped me. Call it stubbornness. Call it a new voice in my head. Cicero's, maybe. Reminding me that age is not something to be ashamed of. That with each strand of gray, I was reclaiming a part of myself. The transition wasn't glamorous. I won't lie to you. There were awkward in-between phases. Moments when I avoided mirrors, when I wore hats to hide the two-toned mess. But I held on. And slowly, incredibly, my reflection began to feel like home again. Like someone who had lived, who had learned, who had loved and lost, and kept going. Someone I could be proud of. And then something remarkable started to happen. People noticed. Not in the way I feared, but in the most unexpected, beautiful ways. Younger women asked me about my decision. Strangers complimented my hair. My friends began questioning their own routines. My granddaughter beamed every time she saw me, saying, "Now you really look like a wise woman." And I began to see what Cicero meant. That growing old is not a decline. It's an evolution, a shedding of layers, masks, and fears. It's the time to become more fully yourself than you've ever been. For me, that started with letting my hair speak its truth. I'll never go back. When I first shared my decision with close friends, the reactions were mixed. Some were supportive, others surprised, and a few visibly uncomfortable. One friend even leaned in and whispered as if revealing a scandalous secret. "But don't you worry it'll make you look old?" I smiled and simply said, "I am old, and I'm okay with that." That's when I realized the fear of aging wasn't just my burden. It was everyone's. We've all been fed this quiet, persistent narrative that aging is something to resist at all costs. That gray hair must be fixed, wrinkles erased, and years reversed. But why? Why are we so afraid of looking like we've lived? It's not vanity, really. It's survival. Society celebrates youth. Youth gets the jobs, the attention, the admiration. But the irony is, youth is fleeting. It's experience, wisdom, and resilience that endure. And they don't always come wrapped in tight skin and dyed roots. This isn't just philosophy. It's deeply personal. I spent years investing in hair color, anti-aging creams, and flattering clothing that promised to subtract years from my appearance. I smiled at compliments that started with, "You don't look your age," as though looking your age was a tragedy. But beneath the surface, something never quite sat right. Every time I covered my gray, I was also covering my history. The years I raised children, the moments I lost people I loved, the decades I spent working, growing, healing, discovering. Each line on my face, each silver strand, held a memory. And I was erasing them for the sake of fitting in. It was Cicero, again, who gave me the language for what I was feeling. He wrote, "For there is nothing so absurd as to regret having grown old." And I thought, yes, regret is the real tragedy, not age. How many of us spend our precious time and energy trying to hide the very signs of a life well lived? Something else began to change as I embraced my natural hair. I began to care less about what others thought and more about how I felt. I started choosing clothes that felt comfortable and expressive, rather than ones that hid my age. I found myself laughing more freely, speaking more boldly, and worrying far less about how I was perceived. In letting go of the dye, I had unknowingly dyed something else, my self-worth, and now that color was washing out too. One of the most powerful moments in this journey came from a stranger, of all people. I was standing in line at the pharmacy when a younger woman behind me tapped me on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said. "I just wanted to tell you your hair is beautiful. It reminds me of my grandmother. She passed a few years ago, but she always wore her silver hair proudly. Seeing you made me miss her." I didn't expect the tears that came, but I also didn't hide them. That compliment wasn't about vanity. It was about legacy, about how showing up as your authentic self gives others permission to do the same. And in that moment, I realized that this choice, my simple decision to stop coloring my hair, wasn't just about me. It was a quiet act of rebellion against everything that told women they must disappear as they age. Letting my hair go gray didn't make me less visible. It made me more seen. That may sound paradoxical, but think about it. When we stop trying to blend in, we naturally stand out. There is a dignity, a softness, and a power in authenticity that no beauty product can replicate. And once I stepped into that power, other areas of my life began to shift as well. I started journaling more, reflecting on who I was becoming rather than who I used to be. I found new routines that supported my body instead of punishing it. Gentle yoga, afternoon walks, nourishing foods. My energy shifted not because I was younger, but because I was aligned. No more hiding, no more pretending, just being. Of course, not everyone understood. Some people still made assumptions. A few acquaintances asked if I was feeling okay, or if I had given up. But I saw through it. Those comments were not about me. They were projections of their own discomfort with aging, their own fears about what it means to grow older. So I smiled, nodded, and went on living my truth. Because that's what this journey has been about all along. Reclaiming the truth of aging as something sacred, not shameful. The most surprising part of this journey was not how others saw me. It was how I began to see myself. There's a quiet kind of liberation that comes with aging when you stop fighting it. I used to think freedom came from staying young forever, but that was an illusion. The real freedom, the deep, soul-satisfying kind, comes from accepting the truth of who you are in every stage of life. For me, that started at the roots. I began noticing things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The softness of my hair's natural texture, the way the silver shimmered in the sunlight like threads of moonlight. I realized I wasn't losing beauty. I was discovering a new kind of beauty, one that didn't ask for permission, one that didn't need approval. There's a quote from Cicero that stayed with me during this time. He said, "No one is so old as to think that he may not live a year longer." And that, to me, was profound. It wasn't about fearing death. It was about honoring life, right now, in this moment. If we're lucky enough to live into our 60s, 70s, and beyond, shouldn't we be celebrating? Shouldn't we be stepping into that space with pride? But that's not what we're taught. We're taught to cling to youth with white knuckles, to chase it with surgeries, serums, and dye. We spend billions on looking younger, as though aging were a disease instead of a privilege. And somewhere, along the line, we forget to ask ourselves what we're actually afraid of. Is it really the gray hair, the wrinkles, or is it the feeling that we'll be left behind, that will no longer matter? Let me tell you something I've learned. Visibility doesn't come from youth. It comes from presence, from owning your space, your voice, your story. And when you do that, when you step fully into who you are, you become magnetic. Not in a loud, attention-seeking way, but in a steady, grounded, unmistakable way that people feel when they're around you. That's the power of authenticity. And yet, even with all this internal growth, there were moments I felt like a fraud. As my hair grew out, I'd catch glimpses of myself in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. She looked older, yes, but also wiser, softer, more at peace. It took time for my mind to catch up with that version of me, to believe that I didn't need to return to who I was, but instead embrace who I was becoming. During this transition, I started journaling daily. Nothing fancy. Just 10 minutes in the morning with my coffee. I'd write about how I felt, what memories were surfacing, and what I noticed in myself and others. One entry, dated a few months into my gray hair journey, reads, "Today I walked past a mirror and didn't flinch. My hair is almost fully silver now. It's wild, beautiful. I can't believe I was afraid of this. I feel like me." Those words still make me emotional. Not because of vanity, but because of truth. Because of the years I spent trying to be less me in order to be more acceptable. Because of the women I've known, friends, co-workers, even family, who've done the same, who've dimmed themselves in the name of fitting in. But here's the thing. Fitting in is not the same as belonging. You can dye your hair, hide your lines, and shrink your voice, and still feel like a stranger in your own skin. Or you can show up exactly as you are, and attract the people who see you, really see you, and love you for it. That's what started happening. The more I embraced my silver hair, the more aligned I became in every area of life. My friendships deepened. My conversations became more honest. My days felt lighter, freer, more joyful. I wasn't trying so hard anymore. I was simply being. And the ripple effect was real. Friends began asking questions, not out of judgment, but out of curiosity. What made you decide to stop? Do you miss it? Was it hard? These questions led to deeper conversations about aging, identity, and the stories we tell ourselves. Some of those friends began their own journeys toward gray. Others didn't. But they walked away inspired to question the rules they'd been following blindly. And that, to me, is the gift of living authentically. It invites others to do the same. One of the unexpected benefits of embracing my natural hair was how much it simplified my life. It wasn't just about skipping salon appointments or saving money on expensive products, although that was certainly part of it. It was about releasing a burden I didn't even realize I was carrying. Every time I colored my hair, I was trying to keep up with something. A version of myself frozen in time. I was chasing consistency, youth, a look I believe was expected of me. But in doing that, I was also saying no to change, no to growth, no to the honest, evolving reflection of who I was becoming. When I stopped coloring, something shifted in my daily routine. Mornings became gentler. No more harsh chemical smells or rushed root touch-ups before events. No more panic before vacations because my roots might show in the photos. Instead, I had time, space, ease. I began replacing that effort with things that actually nourished me. Morning walks, mindful breathing, hot tea, while reading in my sunroom. And more than that, I noticed something profound. I started trusting my body again. There's a narrative that our bodies betray us as we age, that everything becomes about maintenance, prevention, and repair. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if, instead of viewing our aging bodies as problems to fix, we began to see them as teachers, as companions that have carried us through decades of life and are still here, doing their best? My silver hair reminded me of that. It reminded me that nature knows what she's doing, that the same body that bore children, worked long hours, danced at weddings and grieved at funerals, is still here, offering me presence and purpose. And all I have to do is listen. Cicero believed that aging brings a shift from physical strength to intellectual and moral strength. In his words, it is not by muscle speed or physical dexterity that great things are achieved, but by reflection, force of character, and judgment. That resonated deeply with me. I began to realize that the years I once feared would take things from me were instead giving me something more precious. Clarity. Clarity about who I am, about what matters, about how little the world's opinions should weigh on my heart. And once I embraced that clarity, I began to notice how many women were still hiding, not just with hair color, but in other ways, dimming their light, minimizing their needs, apologizing for their existence. That broke my heart, Because I know what it feels like to wake up and realize you've spent years trying to please a culture that never had your best interest at heart. And I also know what it feels like to let that go and to finally breathe. This journey wasn't just about hair. It was about identity, about peeling back the layers I had built to protect myself and finding something stronger underneath. Not perfection, not flawlessness, but truth. And here's the most beautiful part. The older I got, the less I craved perfection anyway. I didn't need to look like I was 30. I just needed to feel like I was alive, engaged, aligned with who I really was. There's a quiet joy in walking through the world without artifice. It doesn't mean I don't care how I look. I still enjoy style, jewelry, and a little lipstick, now and then. But the difference is intention. I'm no longer trying to hide. I'm choosing to highlight, to express, to celebrate. It's a different kind of beauty. One rooted not in youth, but in presence, in self-knowing. And it radiates. Remember attending a family gathering not long after I'd fully transitioned to gray. At first, there were a few double takes, some polite surprise. But as the day went on, something changed. The compliments shifted. "You look beautiful," someone said. "But more than that, you look so peaceful." That stuck with me, because for the first time in years, I felt at home in my skin. And it showed. Letting go of coloring my hair didn't make me fade into the background. It made me more visible in the ways that truly matter. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson in all this. That visibility, confidence, and beauty don't come from youth. They come from congruence, from the inside matching the outside, from telling the truth with our lives instead of rehearsing someone else's script. Not long after embracing my gray hair, something unexpected began to unfold in my conversations. Not just with friends and family, but with strangers. People would approach me in coffee shops, on walks, even in the grocery store line. They weren't complimenting the color, per se, but rather what it symbolized. "You look like someone who knows who she is." That sentence, spoken by a barista half my age, nearly brought me to tears. Because for the first time in a long time, I did know. And what surprised me most was that the gray hair hadn't distanced me from the world. It had drawn people closer. There was a quiet magnetism to it. Not because it was trendy or dramatic, but because it was real. This authenticity opened up entirely new dimensions of connection. Conversations got deeper. People told me things they hadn't said out loud in years. Young women told me they feared aging. Men confessed their own insecurities about hair loss and invisibility. Even women in their 30s whispered that they were already tired of the pressure to appear forever young. There was a hunger for honesty. And in some small way, my hair had become a permission slip for others to begin telling their own truth. Cicero once said that older people enjoy giving good advice. It compensates them for no longer being able to set a bad example. I laughed when I first read that, but he was right in more ways than one. When you age, you see patterns, cycles, outcomes. You've lived through enough to understand how quickly opinions fade, how transient judgments are, how fleeting youth really is, and how little any of that matters in the end. So I started sharing my story more openly, with friends, with younger women, even online, where I posted a picture of my silver hair with a simple caption, "I stopped coloring at 60. I've never felt more myself." The response stunned me. Comments flooded in from women around the world, some older, some younger, all resonating with the same unspoken pressure to conform. One woman wrote, "You make me feel less afraid." Another, "This is what real freedom looks like." That's when I realized that my story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become part of something bigger, a collective return to truth, a reclaiming of the natural aging process as something worthy of pride, not shame. The irony, of course, is that many of us spend decades building a version of ourselves based on what we think the world wants. We curate, we correct, we conceal. But with each layer we add, we drift further from ourselves. Until one day we look in the mirror and realize we don't fully recognize the person staring back. Stopping the hair dye was, in essence, an uncurating, a deliberate move away from the performative and toward the personal, toward the profound. And no, it wasn't always easy. There were days I felt uncertain, days I longed for the comfort of old routines, days when I didn't feel beautiful by conventional standards. But those were the very days that taught me something invaluable. Beauty isn't a standard. It's a story, one only you can tell. Mine now includes laughter lines around my eyes, silver streaks at my temples, and the quiet confidence that I've lived through. Enough to trust my own voice. And that voice, it's louder now, not in volume, but in clarity, in certainty, in resonance. I know who I am. I know what matters. And I no longer waste precious time chasing a reflection that never truly belonged to me. There's a freedom that comes from being seen as you are, not as you were. Or worse, as you think you're supposed to be. And once you experience that freedom, you can't go back. You won't want to. Now, with a full head of silver hair and a soul that finally feels aligned with the woman I see in the mirror, I look back not with regret, but with gratitude. I'm grateful for every step of this journey, for the uncertainty, the self-doubt, the awkward growing out phase, for the fear that I wouldn't feel beautiful anymore, and for the sweet surprise that I've never felt more radiant. Because beauty, as it turns out, doesn't live in the mirror. It lives in how you carry yourself, in how you speak to others, in how you honor your body, your story, your truth. That's something no dye, no cream, no procedure can give you. That's yours alone to claim. There's a strength in aging naturally that no one talks about enough. Not the passive strength of simply enduring, but the active strength of choosing to show up every day as yourself, unfiltered, undiluted, unapologetic. That strength doesn't just affect you. It transforms those around you. I've watched it ripple out in small but powerful ways. Friends who once scoffed at the idea of going gray now tell me they're thinking about it. Younger women who once dreaded aging now ask me what it's like. And I tell them the truth. It's liberating. And if there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this. Aging is not the end of beauty. It's the beginning of a deeper one. A beauty rooted not in appearance, but in presence, in self-respect, in the kind of peace that only comes when you stop trying to be someone else and start becoming more of who you really are. Cicero wrote that old age is the crown of life, our play's last act. But I don't see it as the end of the story. I see it as the most meaningful chapter, the one where everything you've lived through finally gathers into clarity, the one where your voice deepens, your purpose sharpens, and your presence expands, and your hair. It becomes a reflection of all that, not something to cover up, but something to carry proudly. So if you're watching this and feeling the tug, that quiet inner nudge that maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop hiding, I want you to know, you're not alone, and you're not crazy. You're waking up. You're remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And that, my friend, is the beginning of something beautiful. You don't have to go gray to be free, but whatever path you choose, Let it be one that brings you closer to yourself, not further away. And if you're wondering whether you'll still be seen, still be valued, still be loved, let me be the first to say, yes, yes you will. Not despite your age, but because of it. Not in spite of your silver, but because of the story it tells. Because the world doesn't need more perfect, it needs more real. So here's to silver strands and soft mornings, to honest reflections and unapologetic choices, to growing older not with fear but with pride. I stopped coloring my hair at 60, and I never looked back.